Welcome to a GBA ranking video. If you don't know what the GBA is, the GBA is a competitive Pokemon league. This season, 14 teams drafted 10 Pokemon each, 1 Mega per team, and they go at it week to week with the foreknowledge of what their opponents are bringing and go head-to-head in a traditional sports league style leading up to playoffs and finals matches throughout the season. This video is going to go through the teams and give you kind of a breakdown of what's been going on in the past week and the general season for them and where I think they stack up as far as power goes. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comments, and things like that to help me improve the videos, make them better. And if you have any questions or interested in the GBA, please leave a comment below. Check out the links in the description and go check out the other GBA videos. And we're having a lot of fun this season. That said, let's go ahead and jump right into the rankings. San Jose Sharpedos are going to go up to number 1 this week. A 5-0 win is obviously impressive no matter who it's against. It's not a 6-0, but it's still a 5-0. However, the main reason I'm going to go ahead and put them at number 1 is I think out of the top contenders, they have the most balanced team. Not necessarily the most immediately threatening. That honor tends to go to the Pelipers. However, they do have an incredibly balanced team with several very vicious threats, as well as solid defensive core and a lot of options. They're up there in the winning records, not the highest in differential, but tied as far as winning records go. And Tom has a lot of luck on his side, and you can ask Magnitude all about that. Luck is a huge game changer and factor in the GBA. And as long as Tom keeps having it and he keeps playing reasonably competent and smart, and he uses his incredibly well-designed team to its potential, he's probably top threat in the league, really. Number 2, Young Buck Baby Keith. And by that I mean Pokemon John and the New Orleans Pelipers. Solid win, taking down the last week's number 1 rated team, and he's doing a great job on a little bit of a comeback streak, trying to stay in the positive numbers, extend his lead, and really looking to cinch his playoff spot in the not as competitive as the Kanto, but still fairly competitive Johto Conference. And I think he's got a really good shot at that. Obviously, like I said in the last bit, he does have the most immediately threatening team on paper. He's really adapted well to having to use that team despite it not being things he's used to using, and he's using them in good, inventive ways. A lot of people kind of thought Deoxys Defense was a garbage pick during the draft process, or that it was just a weird draft pick, but this was another week where he used it well. He realized that Sox didn't have a spinner, didn't have anything for that, so he set up his hazards, add-on damage. Can't deny the fact that he got some lucky crits, and that definitely helped him win the game easier, but it's very unlikely that he wasn't going to win the game necessarily. Probably would have just been a smaller differential. However, as it pans out, he did win the way he did. He got the crits, which are absolutely a fair part of the game. And, I think John's a coach to look out for, and one no one should be sleeping on. Number 3, Pittsburgh Steelix don't seem to be a team that want to take more than 1 loss in a row. And if it's anything like the last stretch, it's going to be 1 loss and then a lot of wins, which is probably going to keep them up at the top and probably give them a very good shot at the playoffs. Joe uses his team really well. He doesn't have the most threatening team, and that's kind of why it's hard in these power rankings to keep him up at number 1 in my mind, because the team just isn't there. However, I can't deny him or slight him because he uses what he has as well as people that have more or as much power as him, and that's absolutely an admirable and just scary thing. He came in against a team that on paper outmatches him, has a lot more threats, and he took it apart. And he won his match. Solid 5-0. I mean, there aren't a lot, even with them doing as poorly as they are doing this season, there aren't a lot of teams that 5-0 the Nido-Kings. It's usually a much closer match. So for John to come out and do that, it's just good, solid work, and it shows that the Steelix are a great team and absolutely deserve to be here and will earn their spot in the playoffs most likely. A little hard drop down to number 4 for the Red Sox. It's unfortunate as, like I was saying earlier, I think, the top part is so hyper competitive, and really just 1 week will drop you down. And losing to the Pelbers is not a slight on your team's ability at all, because they do have a scary team, and John's a scary good coach. Nick's also a scary good coach. Unfortunately, the luck wasn't with him this week, and he wasn't able to overcome, power differences in what he had. He just had to go out there with what he had, and he did his best. He made a good run of it. It's very similar to the Steelix, where it's a great team, and Nick is getting the most out of a lot of weird players. I mean, Hariyama is still the league's MVP after 2 weeks of not even putting up any kind of massive numbers, along with just the rest of his team being well constructed generally and doing a lot, even with some very common weaknesses and things like that. It hasn't stopped him or slowed him down. I don't think it's going to. So despite the fact that they dropped, I don't think it's really a drop in the quality of them. It's just the fact that it's time to start looking at things more than necessarily, differential and stats. Yeah, I'm also going to have to start looking more thoroughly into team composition as it narrows down. And, it may just be a thing where the Red Sox might make it to the playoffs. They have a very good shot. They're top of their conference. However, these matches against the big teams are showing they may not have the power to play it off once they get there. Moving back up to number 5 after quite a little drop there is the Arizona Deoxys. Anybody who's been watching all of these or has even just caught some of the earlier ones knows I'm a pretty big Deoxys fan. I really like the team structure. I think they're probably opposite the Sharpedos as far as most balanced and well-constructed team. And it's been really difficult to watch them lose the past couple of weeks. I'm sure it was hard on Gubs to actually lose those matches, to the point where I think it kind of got to him mentally. However, this week just goes to show whether it's a turnaround in mental state or just solid team composition from a solid coach, he's still more than capable of pulling out a good win. And I absolutely think, even if he doesn't come at it as hard as everybody else, he just has enough basic fundamentals and good enough team composition that he can absolutely still make a playoff bid at this point. Mathematically, no one's really out of it besides probably the Granbuls. But it's going to be a little bit of work for him. He may or may not have it into him, but I still think they're an incredibly threatening team. So Deoxys number 5. Another drop for the Milwaukee Sawsbucks. It's a rough drop, but I do think it goes to show that the Sawsbucks have some problems that they're going to have to work for. This year is probably not going to be the year. Not necessarily that they're totally out of it by any stretch. They've won some big matches, and they could still come back and win more big matches and win the whole thing in the end. But it's going to be a bit more of an uphill battle. One of the big problems at this point is dead weight on the roster. They've got a lot of bad picks from the first year's draft that are still floating on there. And until next year when they come off and he can, bolster his roster a little bit more, he's playing with a very shallow pool of things. He's really, 3 men down for the most part. There aren't many weeks you can bring Ditto or Malamar and make it work. So even the other coaches can look at his roster and, whittle down the possible threats from 11 down to 8 or so. And really probably more than that, down to 6 or 7. And that's unfortunate because, the more predictable you are on the GBA, kind of the easier target you are. It is a testament, however, to how well he's been doing that he has, the record he has with that kind of gimped roster comparatively. Unfortunately, this week wasn't his week. Another thing that kind of works against the Sawsbucks, and you hate to blame, you hate to hold it against a guy, but Magnitude traditionally just does not get the rolls and he does not get the luck. And in a game of RNG, that is a factor. You don't bet on a horse that is unlucky. You don't do it. If somebody trips every time they run, whether it be from clumsiness or just horrible accidents, you have to start factoring that in. And that's kind of a thing the Sawsbucks are having to deal with right now. Steve, unfortunately, has to play better than a lot of people just because he's not going to get the roles in his favor, in addition to not having a roster as deep as everyone else's. And, like I said, it's absolutely a testament that he's number 6, and I don't expect him to see him drop much below that, and he's still got plenty of chances to rise up above that too. Number 7's the Toronto Maple Leafs. They did not get to play the match against the Chicago Grand Bulls this week. The Chicago Grand Bulls could not make the match and forfeited it, resulting in a 3-0 win for the Maple Leafs. It's hard to tell how well the Leafs are going to do this season because Cote has been busy and hasn't been able to get all of his matches up, so we haven't seen them really play. We especially haven't seen them grow since they became the premier weather team in the league, in my opinion. And it's going to be interesting to see just how well they do and how well they can do if we ever do get to actually see any of it. But for right now, lack of a game this week, lack of information means they're going to stay at 7. Big drop down to the number 8 spot for the Oklahoma City Thunderous. This probably appears worse than it is, but again, like I said, I think the entire league is competitive. I think this week probably highlighted some problems for Alex as he was unable to beat the Arizona Deoxys just because the team's not there, and for him to be a first season team and not have the team, it's a little bit painful. He does have a lot of great elements, but maybe not necessarily the entire cohesiveness that a lot of the other teams have. The sand isn't fully there and fully implemented, though it is good, and it is still very much a threat, but it's maybe not quite as well rounded as other things and kind of has a little bit of a monotype significant common weakness thread running throughout it, and it's just a little bit of an uphill thing for them. You also have to look at the differential in the numbers for them. Unfortunately, when Alex wins, he doesn't win huge. When he loses, it's pretty standardly middle of the road or bad, and that's a thing that's going to add up, at the end of the season. Like, if he can just if he can just have a good enough win-loss record, obviously he can make the playoffs. But if it's going to come down to differential, it looks like he might get sniped out of the playoffs again, just because he's not putting up enough positive numbers in comparison to the negative numbers when he's losing. And, you don't want to encourage someone to go too big and go for sweeps that might cost them and force them to lose, whereas they could have just won with a 1-0. But he might have to start getting more aggressive if he's put into more situations where he thinks he's going to have a rough schedule ahead and kind of needs to pad his differential, especially in the conference he's in where it is super competitive. I think, differential is going to be the deciding factor for that third playoff team, possibly even a second playoff team, depending on how these weekly matches go. Little hop up for the Yankees this week to number 9. It's a good move up for him this week. It was a good win. It's painful to see the Hall Lucha lose, as I'm a big fan of Fizzy. Especially I thought he played really well this week. But unfortunately, Shady just played it better. He's really gotten back his pace. And slow start Shady Reggie Gigas has, his 6 turns are over and he's good to go. So we might see him do some major work in this last half of the season if nothing else interrupts that. Great plays this week. If you watch his commentary, he was just very aware and thoughtful of what was going on, what his win conditions were going to be, and maintaining that and, going out for things. Still maybe needs a little bit of work on assessing the threats of other teams, figuring out, being able to look through your opponent's eyes and see what they think their win conditions are going to be and planning for that. Also, maybe needs a little bit of help composing a team with 2 viable win conditions, because he even says in his own commentary that a lot of weeks he's been planning for the wrong things. And, he might just need to play it a little bit safer, which I think is going to be hard because he doesn't have a ton of bulk on his team, but I do think it's a thing he can do. It's going to be very interesting. I think next week's going to be a huge week for him as he goes up against the Jasmine, who are by far the bulkiest, most stall-inclined team in the league, and that's a thing he has had problems with. Though, granted, last week, against the Halucha, they brought a significant amount of bulk, and he was managed to pick it off. And he did beat the Nido Kings when they were running a much bulkier variant of their team. And if he can keep that up and really focus in on the things he did right, it's going to be really interesting to see if he can overcome that hurdle that's been, persistent in his play style. And if he can take out the Jasmine, who I think Cooper is one of the best stall players I've really seen, I'll go ahead and say that's not a weakness for him anymore, So, very interesting to see if he's going to be able to do that. I'll hop up to number 10 for the Utah Jasmine. Let me tell you, every week I like the Utah Jasmine more and more. I had a lot of problems with Cooper's draft, even though I had a lot of things that I really enjoyed about it. I'm a huge proponent of Zapdos, despite the fact that it hasn't necessarily put up the numbers this week. I think that he's just gotten better. I think Cooper has one of the, like I said the other week, he's got the best awareness of where his things need to be out of anyone in the league. And he's such a great cerebral player as far as keeping track of what's going on. If you haven't watched his battles and you're not going to be a snob about video quality, and you are fine watching someone play a long-form, slower game, you should absolutely go watch them. Granted, if you're one of those people that's going to whine and bitch about, oh, stall is cheap, blah, 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 then don't watch it, because you're short-sighted and ignorant, honestly. Stall is absolutely viable and legitimate. And I say that as someone who does not play stall, does not have the patience to play stall, and absolutely can get frustrated when I'm up against the stall team that I'm playing against. But Cooper does it well, and he plays it right. And he's just got an incredibly unique way of controlling the momentum of a match. There's a lot of irritation on the other side of his matches from coaches in their, commentaries and things like that. And you can see them get impatient as he's running a clock down to do a move. And it's not an intentional move to piss anyone off. It's literally just he's making sure he's running the calcs, he's thinking out all of his options, and he's planning ahead. It's the same thing all of the other coaches do. A lot of them just tend to do it instinctually and a little bit faster, whereas Cooper is methodically taking his time and going through and doing everything. And it's really fascinating and, just impressive to watch him do it. He works it out, step by step, like someone building a car engine or something like that. And now that he's incorporated a more consistent offense into his thing, into his team and his strategy, I think it's great. I think he's going to do really well. Like I was saying in the last bit, I'm really interested to see his match against Shady. Despite being in different conferences, they both have the exact same record, even down to differential. So it's going to be really interesting to see which one of them comes out and whether his, slower, more defensive style can just put a stop to the Yankees, or if, Shady's going to finally be able to break that down. Number 11, the LA Nido Kings, a little bit of a drop down again. They're not doing too great this season. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Dan's switched it up. He actually did go deeper into his roster this week. Finally brought Gengar out, unfortunately. I think he just brought it on the wrong week. Some good moves, some interesting plays. HP Flying Venusaur is great. That's a legitimate thing. If nothing else, Danza is doing the surprise hidden power game amazingly this season. I think it's just, a little bit more realizing the threats and tweaking things appropriately besides movesets, making sure he's bringing the right spreads and the right things the right week. But I'm not really sure exactly how to correct everything that's going wrong with his team. I think it's just, unfortunate luck and other people doing things better. 12's the Haluchas. They keep breaking my heart with these losses. They're tough losses. They're playing all right. It's just a lot of really bad competition and a really rough year. I think this is going to be a hard year for them, but I think they're going to do way better next year. I think this is a good year for them to feel everything out, get control of the, get their head wrapped around the concept of the GBA and, kind of understand exactly what it works, feel their team out, realize what's working, what isn't working, drop a little bit of dead weight at the end of the season, and have, they're in a good position to pick up a lot of things later on, either throughout some more trades left over or just because they have a lot. I think they have 3 first-round picks next draft, so that alone could be enough to shore them up and make them a super competitive team next year. Escavaliers, number 13, haven't moved. Probably aren't going to move too much, unless they go back and forth with Kyle if he, starts to win some matches. Props to Nexus. Apparently, he did bring Hyper Voice on his Gardevoir finally. Unfortunately, he just wasn't able to actually use it. Crits worked against him, and it was kind of all downhill from there. Got snowballed, and that happens. A first turn crit knockout of one of your most powerful players is a demoralizing thing and can really hurt somebody and make it mentally impossible to come back from. Quick side note on this: every video comment I get someone anonymously posting a thing about why I pick on Nexus's team. I don't pick on Nexus's team. I don't pick on Nexus. Nexus didn't draft as well as he could have, for whatever reason, and a lot of people didn't do that. And he just hasn't played as well as he's capable of playing. He's not a bad player. I'm saying this right now. I have never said he's a bad player. He's a player who makes bad plays. He's a player who makes bad pregame calls and what he's going to bring and the sets he's going to run. But a lot of that's just how much time and effort you have to put into it. And he's a guy that's, trying to do this full time and do a lot of things on the side. And that's, that can eat up a lot of your time and make it hard for you to come up with, these incredibly in-depth EV spreads that everybody else does. I absolutely think he's capable of doing it. He just hasn't done it yet. He might not do it all season. He may have mentally cashed out, I don't know. But, again, even though I know people are still going to leave comments, I'm going to just clarify, I'm not picking on the guy. He's not a bad battler. He's not utilizing the format as well as everyone else in the league, and he has a bad draft. But he's not a bad battler. So, I'm not picking on him. Shut the fuck up. Like I said in the Leafeon segment, the Chicago Grand Bulls could not show up to play their game, so they take a forfeiture at 0-3. Still an 0-8 team. Not much else to say. Sorry. Alright, let's go ahead and go into the predictions for Week 9. First up, Deoxys and Escavaliers. It's kind of a no-brainer. Deoxys are going to take this unless the Escavaliers go really big, which they could. They could absolutely shift it around depending on how much Gubbs' head is in the game and if Nexus wants to really put in the extra work to overcome the odds here. Second match is the Oklahoma City Thunderous and the Atlanta Haluchas. I'm going to give this one to the Thunderous as I think they just have the right pieces to take down the Halucha. I think it's going to be a good match, though. It'll be interesting to see if Fizz can bring anything to upset it, if maybe this will be Keldio's week to just wreck face as opposed to its, fairly average showing throughout the rest of the week. Next up is kind of what I think is one of the most interesting matches of the week, and I talked about it a lot in their segments, but the New York Yankees and Jasmines, both 4-4 teams, deadlocked with a -1 differential. Whoever wins this, if they can win it at 2-0 or more, is going to finally be up in the positive range, and not only in wins, but also in differential. and the other person is going to drop back down to the negative range with a lower differential. Cooper is one of the best, defensive bulk players in the league, and Shady historically has had a problem with that, but this season has taken major steps at becoming better at picking apart large, bulky teams. And, if he doesn't protect his goal bat and he, doesn't watch out, especially for Gothitelle, Golbat could put in a lot of work against this bulky team. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to give a slight edge to Cooper just because he's used to people trying to break down his stall teams, while as Shady is not used to, breaking them down as much yet. So I give the slight edge to the Jasmine, but I really think it could go either way, and I think it's going to be really interesting. Next up, Saws Bucks at Red Sox. This is going to be good match, especially because I believe, they play again before the end of the season, so I think this is going to be a good tit for tat, and, it'll be interesting to see if who wins this match goes on to win the next match, or if they trade off and cancel each other out as far as conference progression goes. I'm going to give this one to the Saws Bucks, because while I don't think they have as deep a roster as the Red Sox, I do think they have, more frightening power and some really good options with them. I'm not sure how much, the Sox really have to take down bulky Cress or, even say a bulky Virizion if that was brought, something like that. So slight edge to the Saws Bucks. Next up is probably the big heavy hitter match of the week. Pittsburgh Steelix versus New Orleans Pelipers. That's going to be crazy. This was a first week match. This was Joe's first big loss when he lost 5-0 to John, just wrecking his face. And he's going to come back and he's going to come out swinging and want the win. He's very much aware of the power disparity between the two teams, but John is also very much aware of just how good a player Joe actually is. So I'm going to give a slight edge to the Steelix on this one. I think Joe is going to have a better read on what John's going to do mentally. And while I think John has been doing some great work with his gimmick sets and set variation, I think Joe has the specialization aspect down a little bit better at this point in the league. Next up is Grand Bulls at Sharpedos. I think this is unfortunate. It's... I think the Grand Bulls have built a much better team. I'm still not sure that it's a team with the power to beat the Sharpedos, though, so I'm going to give them a slight edge. This is a big week, though, and I think the Grand Bulls are going to be really hungry for a win. If they lose this week, they actually tie last season's Saws Bucks losing streak record. If they went on to lose 9 and 10, they would actually take the record. So I know that Kyle really wants a win on this one. It's going to be interesting if he goes hard enough and manages to pull it out, because he absolutely could. He does have a much better team now than he did at the start of the season. If he can just mentally come into it at the right way, he's got a real chance here. Last up is the Nido Kings and Leafeons. This is going to be an interesting one, I think the Nido Kings are at a little bit of a disadvantage as they don't have as much footage to review for the Leafeons and don't really have an idea of what they're going to bring. I think he's probably going to expect rain. I think that's a safe assumption, as, the Leafeons have a fantastic rain team. And even with, the unique options and bulk and Gyarados and Empoleon and the threat of Raikou, I'm still not sure that the Nido Kings necessarily have enough to take down the Leafeons' rain team. So I am going to give this one in a very slight edge to the Leafeons. Hopefully we get to see this match, actually. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be a good example of what the Leafeons can do and how big of a threat they are for making the playoffs in their conference. That's going to wrap up the predictions for this week. As always, please leave a like, comments. Let's talk about stuff. Have fun. Enjoy your GBA matches for the weeks, guys.